Hey you guys, Faith here. Thank you for joining me today on Faith St. Jules. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Today I'm going to show you how to make this elegant maxi dress. This is a knit dress with a mesh overlay and mesh sleeves. I am going to show you step by step how to make this dress as well as give you tips on how to make it your own. Let's get started. Okay, you guys, let's talk about supplies. First, you will need your drafting paper, a rotary cutter or scissor, whichever you're comfortable with. You will also need a glue stick or tape. You will also need a standard fitted dress pattern. I'm using the Sunny Dress pattern from Friday Pattern Company. You can use any other fitted dress pattern that you like that fits you well. You'll also need your fabric. I use this beautiful knit fabric, and I use this mesh fabric for the sleeve and for the overlay. You will also need your ruler for measuring. For this project, you will need to take a few measurements. You will need to measure the length from your shoulders to your high waist area, just below your bust, right here. Then you will also need your waist measurement. And once you measure your waist measurement, you will multiply that by 2. You will do your front waist and you'll do your back waist. And you will multiply that each piece by 2. And if you want more volume for your skirt area, your overlay, you are going to multiply your front and multiply your back waist area by 3. So the more volume, the more you multiply so that you can get that nice voluminous flowy dress if that's what you decide. If you want yours to fit like mine, then you will only need to take your front waist and then take your back waist and measure that by 2 because we're going to gather that in. You'll also need to measure from your upper waist all the way down to where you want your skirt to end. I measured mine all the way down to the floor because I knew I was going to be wearing it with heels. So however long you want it to be, that is up to you. Those are the measurements that you will need to create this project. First, you're going to trace the outline of your pattern piece onto your drafting paper. Do make sure that you also remember to transfer your markings as well. You will need those. Do you remember the measurements that we took earlier? This is where it's going to start coming in handy. You're going to take the measurement from your shoulder to your high waist, and you're going to transfer that onto your pattern piece to make sure that you know where to cut that pattern in half. Now here's the fun part. You get to cut out your pattern piece. But do make sure that you do the same for the back piece as well. Now we are going to create our seam allowance for the bodice and the skirt portion by taking 2 strips of paper, and we are going to glue or tape, whichever choice you decide, the piece to the bodice portion and to the skirt portion. Next, we are going to take our ruler and measure out a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Next, we're going to cut off the excess piece of the seam allowance paper. And we're going to do that for the skirt and for the bodice. Make sure you trim off the sides as well if there's extra pieces on the side. As you can see here, I didn't put enough glue on, so I am actually adding a little bit more glue to make sure that it stays. Now we have our bodice portion and our skirt portion with enough seam allowance to connect our two pieces later. Make sure you do this for the back pieces as well. It's time to cut the fabric. It's time to cut the fabric. All right, you guys, now we are cutting out our pattern piece onto the fabric. We're going to do this for the back and the front pieces. Depending on the dress pattern that you're using, you may or may not require a neckband. If you do, go ahead and cut that out. That arm length measurement that we took earlier on, we're going to be using it here. We are going to measure the length and we're going to mark that onto our fabric piece, or you can do so on a drafting paper if you choose. Then I'm going to draw my line with my chalk at an angle because I want my sleeves to be fitted. Now we are going to cut out our sleeves onto our fabric. You are going to lay your front and back piece of your mesh onto the cutting table, and you're going to take your waist measurement as well as your desired length, and you're going to transfer that onto your fabric piece, and then you're going to cut it out. Okay, you guys, now we have all of our pieces cut and ready to go. Now it's time to start sewing. With the bodice pieces right side facing each other, we are going to stitch just the shoulder seams. We are going to do the sleeve flat method. So you're going to take your sleeve and you're going to lay it onto your bodice armhole area, right sides facing. Make sure that you have your slit because you're going to line that center slit with your shoulder seam. And then you're going to take your pin and pin that into place. Get in there, pin, so stubborn. Then you're going to take the ends of your armhole and your sleeve, and you're going to pin that into place as well. You are going to do the same thing to the other side. Now that we have our main area secure, you are going to go ahead and pin the rest of your sleeve and bodice together. As you are pinning, you can go ahead and you can stretch it just a little bit to make sure that everything lays flat and fits. Now you are going to do the same to the other side. Once you are done pinning, take it to a sewing machine and stitch everything together. Now that your sleeves are attached to your bodice, if you have a neckband that needs to be attached to the bodice, you can go ahead and follow instructions on your pattern on how to prep that neckband, how to stitch it, and how to place it on the neckline of your bodice. Next, you are going to stitch from the sleeve all the way down to the side seam of your bodice on both sides. Now you have your bodice complete and you have your skirt complete. Next, you're going to go ahead and hem the bottom of your skirt portion. Now you are going to take your 2 mesh pieces, right side facing, and then you are going to stitch along the side seam on both sides of your mesh pieces. Once you have done that, you are going to gather that mesh skirt all the way around. You will take your gathered mesh skirt and you will insert your knit skirt inside of it, and then you will do a basting stitch all the way around. You will then take your skirt piece and you will turn it inside out. And once you have that inside out, you will then have your bodice piece, which is right side out, turn it upside down, and you will insert that bodice piece inside of your skirt piece. Make sure that the front is facing the front and the back is facing the back. You don't want to have to redo this or pull out that seam ripper. Once you do that, you will then take your side seams and line it up. And you will then make sure that you line everything else up by the notches or by the circle, however your pattern pieces are marked. And again, if you have to stretch it a little bit to ensure that it fits, that is fine. This is a knit fabric, but you do not want to have to stretch it too much, just enough to get it to line up properly. You're going to take your pins and you're going to pin the bodice and the skirt together all the way around, and then you're going to take to your sewing machine and stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, you guys, give yourself a round of applause. You are done. You have completed your maxi dress, and now it's time to style it and take it out on the town. Or since we're in quarantine, take it to the front yard.